The content patch for 1.2 has been live for a little over a week by the time this video is up, and as more people complete the story, more are starting to vocalize their opinions, mostly revolving around one thing. It's kinda short. The thing is, most Honkai Star Rail players have been waiting for quite a while for the continuation of the xianzhou story, but the way it's been handled leaves a lot to be desired. So in this video, we're gonna talk about the story in 1.2. Is the situation really that bad, or is this just a case of quality over quantity? Before we dive into that, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now, I don't normally cover topics like this that pertains to news or opinions about the game. I tend to just cover lore on this channel, but as this does relate to the lore somewhat, I assume it gets a free pass for content. I'm going to talk about a few things here that relates to the story in 1.2, so if you haven't played it, I do suggest completing it first before watching this video. You can bookmark it or save it however you want, but play the story first, as I don't want this video and my opinions to color your views or change your experience of it. You can always come back later, watch the video and share your opinions then. For those of you who are going to continue, as things of this nature tend to be a bit divisive, I would urge you to watch the video in its entirety before commenting. Also, the discussion here will only be about the Trailblazer quest and not any other content that has been introduced alongside 1.2's patch. With the disclaimers out of the way, let's discuss the first issue, its length. Truth be told, I personally felt it was kinda short. It took me maybe around 2 hours or so to clear the entire main story, and it wasn't as though I was even rushing. After waiting for the better part of almost 2 months, I was really hoping for a bit more of the story given how well the game has performed since launch, at least financially. This isn't a comment on how good the story itself is, we'll talk about that later, but the length does seem to make it feel like a subquest rather than a fleshed out continuation of the main storyline. I don't know if this is because most of us have been anticipating some story content for a while and have built it up in our minds that the next chapter would be just as lengthy as what we received before, but for me, I didn't realize how short it would be until it actually ended. I guess I just naturally expected it to be longer, and it mostly left me with mixed feelings of wanting more, but also asking myself, was that really all of it? A shorter story isn't necessarily a bad thing, as I do know that some who play this game do so rather casually and log in for maybe 15 to 30 minutes a day and just play a little bit at a time. A full-blown new region with 30 hours of story is probably difficult for a casual part-timer to clear completely if that volume of content comes out every month or so. But even if you aren't rushing through it, I doubt it would take you too long to reach the end, as again, it's really only a couple of hours at most. The story itself also left me with mixed opinions. First off, let me just say that I was thoroughly engaged throughout the duration of the story. When I compare it to Genshin Impact, especially the stories about the events or non-Archon storylines, I tend to get bored sometimes because the story can drag a little bit and are often cookie-cutter storylines. In this one though, each scene made me interested in seeing what would happen next, and it all seemed to be building towards a climax with each of the characters and their storylines converging on the main antagonist. Up till this point, each of the main groups such as the main characters group, Dan Heng's group, and even Jingwan were running parallel to each other, but you could obviously tell they would eventually meet up at the final scene, which was something to look forward to and drive the interest in the story further. There was also enough twists and expositional lore that balanced world building with scene-to-scene moments, especially with that Ting Yun scene and the fight between Blade, Dan Heng, and Yan Qing. However, the villain turning out to be an emanator of destruction feels a little bit unplanned. There doesn't seem to be any build-up or hints that destruction was even involved in the previous story build-up, as it focused more on the Aeon of the Hunt and the Aeon of Abundance. Now maybe I'm misremembering things here, but I can't recall specific hints to destruction having a hand in the events that have previously transpired. In any case, while the Ting Yun twist was surprising for me, even though prior to it I did suspect Ting Yun was acting rather oddly, the more I thought about it, the more it bothers me that destruction just appeared rather randomly. Now I know that the Stellaron is speculated to come from destruction itself, and that might be the big hint here, but it's never really mentioned in the story that they indeed call their origins to the Aeon of Destruction himself. Basically, I just felt that it was a really easy direction to take by claiming Destruction is the bad guy, and they felt kinda shoehorned into the whole affair, which was initially played out to seem like it was a hunt versus abundance story. I was also really hoping to see more about the complicated dynamics of the paths of the hunt and abundance, as well as Dan Shu, but even she got sidelined and largely seemed unimportant in the grand scale of things. At the end of the story, even the defeat of the Emanator of Destruction happened really quickly. Sure, she was using a borrowed body and we had the help of two powerhouses, but still. We also did not learn much about many of the mysterious characters I'm sure many of you were hoping to learn more about, like Luocha, Blade, Jingliu, and even their relationships with each other. All in all, I enjoyed the story immensely while I was experiencing it, but started to notice a lot of its shortcomings on multiple revisits and discussions. Now, all this may sound a little bit critical of the whole thing, but it does sort of paint an impression of what we might expect to happen in the future. Despite how they handled this particular story, though, I think it might be a bit too early to abandon all hope entirely. Firstly, the next banner is going to be Kafka, followed by Fu Xuan and Imbibitor Lune, which indicates that the story within the xianzhou Luofu may not be entirely over. Kafka is a real good indication that they might be saving the big ticket stuff for her patch, as most of the fanbase is super hyped for Kafka specifically. So I do see the possibility that the big climax and ending would be reserved for her release. On top of that, if you played the current event that has been released in 1.2, it seems even the writers are poking fun at the structure of the story. So either they are incredibly self-aware and know people will point out the shortcomings of this particular story, or they're completely oblivious. The fact that they poke fun at the structure of the story in the event also makes me think that they will likely shore things up in the next story installment, as they might be aware of how ending the story at this point might look. Speaking about that, it's also important to remember that we are likely in the middle of the story, the interlude to be more specific. So the next part of the story may explore and close out some of these unanswered questions and story threads, like with Blade, Luocha, and maybe even Jingliu. This could be a good or bad thing, as it places a lot of expectations on the next patch, and if the story is just as bare bones as this one or isn't tremendously satisfying in terms of its payoff, then we may have to start worrying just a little bit. Again, I'd like to reiterate, taking the story for what it is, I still had fun with it. The Tingyun reveal, some backstory on Dan Heng, a three-way between Blade, Dan Heng, and Yan Qing, as well as the final battle and Dan Heng being basically Moses, were all enjoyable to me. I just wish that it didn't feel so short and the villain didn't literally just appear without any significant setup. I think they could have done more with Danshu as well, but it doesn't seem that she will be returning anytime soon. Also, there is a few things that came out with the patch, like the new MOC stages, Yukong's companion quest, and a new character in Blade, plus a new event, so the patch isn't completely bare bones, and again, I'm just focusing on the story in this video. If you follow leaks, then you know a lot more things are coming right around the corner, so content-wise, I think we might be okay. I hope that the story does close up neatly in the future, and hopefully we get to learn more about the characters we've met along the way, and perhaps I'm just being too critical with a story that has yet to properly end. To not prolong this any further, I'll end my rant here. Let me know in the comments what you think of the story, and if you enjoyed watching the video, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and as usual, have a good day ahead.